Hi student, I am Assistant Professor Sayali Patil from Sarat College of Arts, Commerce Science. Today I am going to explain you or calculate the another method of calculating valuation of shares. For in first session we discuss about the calculation of intrinsic value method, that is the separate method. Then we calculate the yield basis method. That is the second method. Now we discuss with the third method, that is the fair value method. In fair value method we have to calculate net asset method as well as the yield basis method and then the fair value method. So you can say fair value method of valuation of share is an average of first method, that is the net asset or intrinsic value method, and yield basis method. Now one by one we calculate all three methods in one question. So before that we have to understand the question and the meaning of various headings related with that question. Following is the balance sheet of Janta Limited as on 31st March 2020. Liabilities: issued capital 40,000, equity share of 10 each 4 lakh, general reserve 90,000, profit and loss account 20,000, 5% debenture 1 lakh, current liability 1 lakh 30,000, block capital means your fixed asset 5 lakh, current asset 2 lakh and goodwill 40,000. Total of balance sheet 7 lakh 40,000. Now we discuss with some additional information. On 31st March 2020, the block capital independently valued at 5 lakh 50,000 and goodwill at rupees 50,000. The next, the profit for the last 3 years were rupees 51,600, 51,650 and 52,000, of which 20% was placed to reserve. This proportion being considered reasonable in which the company is engaged and where a fair investment return may be taken at a 10%. Compute the value of company by shares. As your question gives you, we need to understand what are the number of equity share. First, identify the number of equity share. There are the 40,000 number of equity share mentioned to you. There are outsider liabilities, includes the 5% debenture and current liability is considered as a, actually when we discuss this we consider only current liability, but in if the debentures are present it is also considered. So you can say outsider liabilities are considered. 5% debenture and current liability is calculated for the calculation of net assets, and then goodwill and block assets are there. Make sure when we calculate the next heading or the calculation of net asset, you have to calculate the valuation of asset as per the heading. For this purpose, we have to follow three methods for the net asset method or the intrinsic value method. That is the first main point, that is net asset, calculation of net asset. Then second, funds available to equity shareholders. This is the calculation number 2. And then use formula for the calculation of intrinsic value or the net asset method or valuation of share as per the net asset method or the intrinsic value method. So in this way we use 3 steps. So first step, that is the step 1. Now we calculate step number 1, net asset. Calculate the net valuation of asset. Net assets. It is calculated with the calculation of valuation of assets into balance sheet. Into adjustment. As per this method, we have to calculate net asset by using valuation of asset from your adjustment. So you can say revised value of asset or you can say releasable value of assets are considered while calculating the net asset. So block capital in your adjustment or the valuation are given or revalued at rupees 5,50,000. So the first point, that is block asset. So by this way, net asset will be considered from your adjustment. You can see it is at your revalued value or at your releasable value. In your question, block asset valued at 5,50,000 and goodwill again valued 50,000. But in your balance sheet, it is mentioned block asset rupees 5 lakh and goodwill rupees 40,000. So consider from your adjustment or the adjusted value or revalued value or releasable value. but some assets, those who are not mentioned in your adjustment but still present in your balance sheet, so consider that asset as it is only tangible asset and all assets which is recorded on your asset side. So the current asset taken from balance sheet as it is, that is current asset is equal to 2 lakh. So the total asset is equal to, or total of A is equal to total of all asset, that is 550, 2 lakh and 50,000 is equal to rupees 8 lakh. This is your total asset. Then reduce liabilities less liabilities. Liabilities include outsider liability. In our question, there are two outsider liabilities, that is the 5% debenture and current liability. Current liability is considered as it is. Always current liability is considered for the evaluation of net asset or the asset calculation. So in this heading there is a debenture also. So take 5% debenture, rupees 1 lakh. First point, 5%. Rupees 1 lakh. And creditors current liability, total current liability 1,30,000. So the total of current asset and current liability will be, current less total liability, 5% debenture, that is outsider liability, and current liability is also considered as a outsider liability. So the total of B total B 1 lakh plus 1,30,000, 2,30,000. 2,30,000. So net asset will be equals to A minus B. A minus B, that is 8 lakh minus 2,30,000. A minus B, that is 8 lakh minus 2,30,000. 8 lakh, that is your total asset, and B total liability, outsider liability, 8 lakh minus 2,30,000. Net asset will be answer for net asset. Net asset is equal to 5,70,000. This is the net asset. Then calculate the step 2, funds available to equity shareholders. Funds available to equity shareholders with the formula net asset less preference share capital. So net asset calculated in above calculation, that is the calculation number 1. Net asset 5,70,000. Check whether preference share capital present in your question. Issued equity share, but there is no mention of, or there is no amount present for the preference share capital. So nil amount will be reduced. So there is no amount. So you can write nil or 0. funds available to equity shareholder will be 5,70,000. Funds available to equity shareholder 5,70,000 as it is. This is the step number 2. We calculate or we find the funds available to equity shareholder. Now we use formula and calculate the funds, intrinsic value as per net asset method or the net asset method or intrinsic value method. Formula for this: funds available to equity shareholder divided by number of equity shares. Funds available to equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares. By with the formula we can adjust or we calculate funds available to equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares for the calculation of intrinsic value method. So funds available to equity shareholder, the calculation number to 5,70,000 divided by number of equity share. Number of equity share is already mentioned in question, that is 40,000 number of equity shares. So your value of intrinsic value of each equity share or per share value as per net asset method is rupees 14.25 per share. So the answer for the first method is rupees 14.25 per share of each equity share. Now let's understand the method how we calculate our first heading, that is the valuation of net asset method or intrinsic value method. For this purpose we have to calculate first step net asset. Net asset means the assets, valuation of asset as per the requirement or as per the adjustment, or you can say releasable value of assets, less liabilities or outsider liabilities. In this question 5% debenture and current liabilities are mentioned. Total A, that is the total asset, less total liability or outsider liability. Only outsider liabilities are considered. P&L, balance, capital, reserve are not considered for the calculation of net asset method. So the net asset is 8 lakh minus 2 lakh 30,000. 5,70,000 is the value of net asset, that is the calculation number 1. Then we use the next step, that is the funds available to equity shareholder. Yes, it is important, if the preference share are present in your question, you have to reduce from the net asset. So the net asset 5,70,000 as per your calculation number 1, less preference share capital, but in your question there is no preference share capital mentioned. So nil amount is there, and funds available to equity shareholder, that is the answer for this 5,70,000 less preferential capital 0, 5,70,000. Then we use a third step, that is the step number 3 for the valuation of share. Net asset method or intrinsic value method, as per this method we use formula for funds available to equity shareholder divided by number of equity shares. Divided by number of equity shares. So 5,70,000 is mentioned or given in your question. 5,70,000 divided by 40,000 number of equity shares, which is calculated by